Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Bad Lit Friends, the writing podcast that still barely knows what it's doing. I'm your host, Kirk Rafferty, and this time around, my co host is Ann Wells. Meagan is off doing her high school reunion, and so Ann has agreed to join me and talk about some really cool stuff. So, Ann Wells writes YA mythic fantasy under the name A.E. Wells. She is currently working on A Swan Dark, inspired by swan maiden folklore, ancient magic, and dangerous emotional bonds. Her work explores the cost of becoming someone new, wounded gods, girls who cross thresholds they can't uncross, and devotion sharp enough to scar. Ann Wells, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me here. I'm a huge fan of the show, love listening to it every week, and I'm just sad that Megan's not here, but hopefully she's having fun.
I think she is having fun. Actually, I think we're going to have a better.
Yeah, she's probably missing this.
Yeah, totally.
Yes. She's probably secretly going in the bathroom with her recording device and talking to it, pretending she's with us.
That's right. She's doing like her little shadow podcast.
Yes. Yeah. No, thank you for having me here. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so we're going to talk today about the emotional craft of writing. And I was so excited when you proposed this because one of the things that editors and like beta readers are telling me all the time is my characters kind of lack depth. Like they love the plot, they love the story, whatever. They even like the characters. Just they kind of want to feel like a little closer to that character. And so that's always a challenge to me is to really bring those characters more to life, to really kind of dig deep down inside them. So, well, I hope you're gonna like teach me how to write tonight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been a huge challenge for me. And I think it is probably a challenge for any writer out there. People put so much emphasis on the plot, the structure, tropes. I don't know if you get overwhelmed with all the tropes. Everybody's throwing
Yeah,
tropes out now, to the
yeah.
point where some of the books just feel like the same model over and over and over again. And I
Mhm.
think one of the reasons it feels that way is they're missing that emotional journey, like the deeper emotional connection, because that really makes your characters, like, pop out and you remember them
Yeah.
too. So I think it is a struggle probably for every writer out there, and at least for me, I'm working on it right now.
So, before we dive too far into that, we usually talk about how our writing is going, and I think this is a good seg into that. So, Anne, how is your writing going?
So it's going great. My struggle right now is time, which I'm sure you and Megan the same struggle as everybody out there.
Yes.
So working full time and then trying to actually write a book at the same time. But it's been great. I had developmental edits done in January, and that took a while to get those back. And so right now I'm working through all the developmental edits I got from the
Mhm.
editor. And that was one of the recommendations was on that emotional journey and craft and putting that together. So that's what I've been really working on is getting a better handle on the emotions, going through her edits, adding that interiority to your characters as well.
Yeah.
It's so fun because when you feel like you put that in the character, it makes it so much more alive, right? Like, you're, like, in the book while you're writing it.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
it's just adding whole new layers of texture. So I'm so excited. I'm hoping to have all these edits done in this round. Mind you, there's been like a million rounds of edits. I think I far
Yeah.
surpassed whatever quota they gave you. You're going to edit your book 7 times or 9 times. I make those people look silly because I'm like, I'm going for infinite edits. I hope after this round of edits, I'm going to start actually reaching out to agents.
I have always enjoyed editing more than the initial writing, which I know is backwards from what a lot of people. In fact, Megan even at one point she thought I was absolutely crazy for because she hated editing. I absolutely love editing, and I do the infinite edits. I think to a fault, just because I love like finishing that edit and then going back to the beginning again and just keep on, like as you say, adding the layers or just kind of sanding down some of the edges or bringing something else out. So, do you want to talk a little bit about your current work in progress?
I would love to.
Awesome.
So it's a Swan Dark. It's YA fantasy. And it follows a girl who vanished from a lake for about a week when she was a child. Years later, she returns and finds out that the magic that stole her wants her back. So one of the big things is her fear isn't so much the magic itself, but what she will find out when she, I guess, steps into it more. So the part of her that actually wants to answer that call. So it's told in a dual POV following two people trapped on opposite sides of century old conflict and a dangerous bond neither of them can escape. It's inspired, as you said, by Swan Maiden folklore. There's dragon lore in it, also dark fairy tale influence. It's about transformation, longing, and magic that costs everything.
It's fantastic. It sounds so good. And you said you're very close to Aquarian.
Yes, I am really hoping to start that journey. I'm
Awesome.
at the point where I read other people's rejections. People will post, I got rejected by this and that. And I'm like, I can't even get there. I just want to be there with you. And I feel like I can't even get in the trench. So one day I will get into the trench.
That's really good to hear that you're almost ready to query because this book sounds fantastic and I think it needs to be out.
Thank you.
All right, so shall we Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't talk about my writing. So my writing my writing is going pretty slow right now. So I'm getting this book ready to self-publish. Last week I had told Megan that I was really kind of hitting the end of my edits. I feel like it is about 99.9% ready to go, and then, I just decided to give it one more go over, and so I'm actually just kinda reading it from front to back again, and this won't be any super heavy duty edits. I think I've gotten all the typos. I say famous last words, but, I think I've got, all the big stuff, and now, I might catch a weird piece of grammar or something like that is probably what I'm looking for right now. That's kind of eating up my time, and then I'm hoping next week I actually get to start writing my horror novel again. Yeah, that's gonna be
Word
really
is like, I have a hard time saying that word. So if you can't understand me when I say it,
fun.
but it is making a huge like comeback.
It is. It is. My daughter is a writer, and she writes horror, and she read my first 2 books, which are thrillers, and she was like, "Do you know how, like, horror adjacent these books are?" She's like, "You basically wrote a horror novel that is just quite not a horror novel." She's like, "You should write a horror novel." So I thought I'd write a horror novel. We'll see how that
That's
goes.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gotten popular and I don't even like that genre and I've started reading it. And I'm like, "Wow, I'm on the bandwagon too. This is awesome."
I know, and gosh, there are so many good horror novels coming out right now. I am in the middle of reading The Buffalo Hunter.
I don't know that one.
It is a Western horror novel. I'm not gonna spoil it at all. Like, you know what? If you're really enjoying horror right now, buy it, don't read anything about it, just start reading the book, and you will be so pleasantly surprised. It's such a good book.
That's awesome.
I'm about, what am I, 3/4 the way through it. All right. Well, shall we go ahead and jump into the emotional craft of writing?
Yeah. No, that sounds great. So, emotional craft of writing, we're trying to add in these deeper emotional layers. And a lot of times, as writers, you're like, oh, okay, my character's sad. My character feels this. And I mean, sometimes you even write that this person was sad or they
Mhm.
made I don't know, I use faces a lot. So, one of the examples I have is an exasperated face. So, one of the big things is not writing the emotions, showing the emotions. So, how do you show someone sad, show that they have an exasperated face? Which, for that one, I'll give you an example. Now, when that character's talking, they gesture quotation marks for the comments they're making in the air.
Uh-huh.
So, like little actions of showing versus having to tell an emotion. Another way you could do that is through dialogue. So, speaking fast when nervous. I do that all the time. So I know exactly how that goes. Go faster and faster the more nervous I am. My favorite one is what people aren't saying. So my new thing is when somebody asks a question and the person won't answer that question. And I'm like, oh, that's my favorite scene.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's not being said, or they answer it, but they don't actually answer that question. So you can use it through dialogue. It could be internal thoughts, like mind going crazy in those scenarios.
Mhm.
The big one, you're doing horror. if anybody can understand me when I say that word, sensory details. So, like, what environment are they in? Like, the woods are watching them, crows in the trees, like those sensory
Yeah.
details that tell you the different feeling, or they don't
Uh-huh.
tell you, but you're feeling it with that person. And then little action like body language, hands tightening, and I'm really bad. Everybody in my book is tightening hands, they're tightening their jaw, and when I go back through and edit, I'm gonna have to mix it up because there's just too much tightening.
I have so much, like, jaw tightening, jaw clenching. Yeah.
Yes. My characters have ginormous jaws at this point. They're, like, muscular and worked out.
When you're talking about what the character doesn't say, I will often do, like, deflection as well. So, "Hey, what's going on?" And then the character responds with, "I'm fine," right? Or something,
Mhm.
I mean, better written than that. So it's I guess sort of similar to not answering the question is deflecting the question as well.
Yeah, and I love that when the character's lying. They're like, "No, I'm fine. Everything's
Right.
fine." Right? Like, the obvious lies to the reader. As a reader, I like that, the play on dialogue and what's not being said. So then you're putting all these, like, deeper context clues, and you're almost as a reader, it's like you're the detective solving what's going on by these little subtle clues.
Mhm. How do you handle I have started writing first person, and it seems to work well for horror for me. So sometimes I run into this issue where, my character, let's say, is afraid. So I can just say, because I'm writing in first person, I can say, I was afraid or I am afraid, right? But because if I say, well, like what, I clench my teeth, but like most of us aren't aware of when we're clenching our jaw or we're not aware of some of these things that our bodies are doing, right? Maybe if our hands are shaking, we might notice that, but if we're like, clenching our fist, we may not recognize that. So, I don't know, how do you handle that? Or do you write in first person?
So I've written short stories in first person. My book is in third person. And I would say something you could do is you could write it in third person. So you're describing all the actions, the tightening of the chest, the clenching of the jaw,
Mhm.
almost like you don't know what the interior is, and then go back and add that in, because I think you could write that in first person, like, "Oh, my
Yeah.
jaw is clenching so bad." Not
Huh.
like that, but you know what I mean? Like, write
Mhm.
in how the person's feeling, so show it through the body. It could be through the racing thoughts too in first person.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know, that could be an exercise trying to write it from third person and then going back to first person.
Always an exercise. Yeah.
I started the book I'm working on now, I started it in first person, and then for some reason, I was like, "Nope, I'm gonna put it in third." And so I rewrote it in third, and it was so interesting because first person's all you get so much of the interior thoughts, but it wasn't that much different than in third person because you can still have all that.
Right. Yeah, so third person just doesn't necessarily distance you. If you're writing in that character's POV, you've still got the interiority. You mentioned environmental and sensory details too, and I thought that was really interesting. Again, kind of coming from this horror perspective. So you mentioned, like the trees are watching, which, if you've ever been in the woods alone by yourself, you know exactly what that's feels like,
It's
right? Like, it's
terrifying.
pretty creepy. When I was really young, my dad and I were out camping. We went on a fishing trip together, and I think I was probably about 9 years old, something like that, and we got separated. It wasn't for very long, but all of a sudden I realized, like, I am all alone by myself, and man, talk about a writer formation moment. I was terrified, I was panicked, and
That is horrible as a child to be alone in
yeah,
the woods. Was it at
yeah.
night too?
No, it was during the day, but we were in a very remote area of the, Colorado Rocky Mountains, and, I mean, it was just dead silent around us with, I don't know, maybe birds or something like that, but it was just this total feeling of isolation. I mean, obviously, he was within shouting distance, but it was just, my kid's brain, going off and so, yeah, that was terrifying. So, like, those kind of sensory details, if you can pull those in, I think really work well.
In the woods, I do a lot of camping, hiking. They are
Mhm.
terrifying in the dark alone.
In the dark alone, yeah.
Yes, and I guess it doesn't even have to be in the dark. But usually if people are with you, it's not as terrifying. But yeah, it can be very scary. So I have a lot of in my book, there's a lot of sensory with and they're in the woods a lot. So the
Hmm.
different woods and the feelings you get in the woods and what sounds you're hearing, super fun.
And it also helps kind of ground a sense of place too.
Um, Next one is conflict. So emotional conflict. And I think this one's a really good one because it makes your characters more human. And I live in a state of emotional conflict. I very much identify with that feeling where you're
Hmm.
constantly conflicted. So you're happy, but you're also sad. Good examples of this like one character is happy for someone else, but they're also jealous. You've got fear mixed in with longing, wonder mixed with dread. There's attraction, but also insecurity, shame mixed in there. So just having these contradictions, moments of vulnerability where one of my characters is very kind of cold and aloof and wants to put everybody in place. So having her have those vulnerable moments where she's accidentally letting out some of that interiority, letting it show, help
Hmm.
her because before she was very flat. She's just this bossy, mean person. But adding those contradictions in there make her more like a real person because no one's just flat and bossy, right?
Right, right.
We're a giant tangled mess of different emotions.
The attraction mixed with shame is a great one. It makes me think of I just finished reading American Rapture by CJ Lead, and she's got a character who was raised very strict Catholic, has never even, like, been to a movie theater, very, very
Oh my god.
isolated, and this kind of world-ending apocalypse happens, and she's with this boy. She is very attracted to him, but she knows that if she acts on it, she's going to hell, right? And so there
So
is this
terrible.
it's awful. It is this constant push-pull with these 2. It's done so well that, this just electric attraction between them and also just this overwhelming shame that she has that kinda keeps them also at a distance. So, yes, you're absolutely right. Like, in the hands of a different writer, it could just be, "Oh, I forgot all my Catholic teachings, and I just, we just went for it," but yeah, I think you're right. I think the trick here is to kinda, add layers.
Right. And I think too, the book, what is A Story Genius? It's one of the craft writing books. I forget who wrote it. I think it's Lisa Crone.
Oh, I'm not familiar with this one.
This one?
Oh, yeah, I've seen that book.
Okay. Yeah, it was people always highly recommend it.
Mhm,
It's all about so when we write stories, we have this whole plot laid out and it follows that 3-act structure, the first act, second act, third act, the climax, all of it. But you should also have this interior journey. So what your emotional journey is happening to your character. So this book was a
mhm.
lot talking about how there should be this interior journey, interior issues, and there needs to be something wrong with that character, like some deep inner wound within them. So you were saying shame, and I was gonna say shame, I think, is like one of those core wounds that probably everybody out there has. So it's a great one because anybody can identify with that deep sense of shame or guilt. But adding in that deeper journey and then working on those deeper emotional wounds and trying to work through it in your book.
Yeah, and I think that's probably core to at least all of my main characters. I think I figured that out pretty early on is, I used to write a lot of short stories and even, like, unfinished novels, and I can see, like, my main characters tended to be a little bit flat, and so my characters were there to drive a story, right? And at some point, I figured out, oh yeah, trauma is trauma
Right?
is a great backstory to have, because now you have a character that is, I mean, obviously they have to drive the story, but you sort of have you have a good reason for it, right? So because it's their internal trauma or their, something in their past or something formative that sort of guides their actions instead of just, "Oh, he's a good guy, so he just does good things." And sometimes he makes mistakes.
Yeah, and I think so trauma, that's a great one. The thing I would say about that, I've been reading about people using that how do you say it? It's almost like the generic trauma a character has. They're like,
Yeah.
they have this wound to make them more interesting. And I'll put it with romantasy. Hopefully, I don't get hate mail talking about romantasy, but a lot of people are always talking about romantasy and what they think of it, which I'm not a romantasy reader, so I'm not an expert at all. But they'll give like the male character has some traumatic past to make him more interesting.
Yes.
And I think that is where the disconnect is. So, trauma is a great one because we all have trauma and it pulls us in. But can you tie trauma into that emotional journey and then tie it in with the plot as well?
Mhm.
That's where a lot of these more formulaic books, they'll put that in there and then it's like it disappears. It never happened. You'll see like a couple of gestures later, like, oh, yeah, they have trauma, but it's not part of that character anymore and you're not feeling it.
Yeah, you see this in romantasy, and again, so I'll get hate
Talking about
from
romantasy.
romantasy readers too, but but so you'll have the dark, brooding male lead and whatever trauma is in his past, and then it's up to the female main character to kind of break through that shell that he has created. But once she's broken through the shell, the trauma kind of disappears, right?
Right.
So the trauma doesn't drive his actions anymore, or even if they ever did. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I hate to
It's not
say
just
that.
romantasy, by the way. I've seen it in
Yeah,
other books, but I see it
oh my gosh.
a lot in romantasy.
Well, I'm in fantasy, and I think that's a common fantasy thing too.
Mhm.
In fantasy, I mean, we're similar. Well, I guess romantasy includes fantasy, but we have our same formulaic. You get those more formulaic stories.
Mhm.
As well, and I think that that is one of the differences is when you can put more of that emotional journey in there and, like, you're actually entering in that trauma and getting out on the other side, you no longer have a formulaic book, right? Now you have something that's so much deeper, and readers feel that and they sense it because they are on that journey. That is what the romantasy readers want. They want that big, dark guy that's got all that trauma, they want him to open up and this main character to change them. Cause I mean, that's like ultimate power. Like, oh, I can make this person like heal them in a
Yeah.
sense, right? It's so
Uh-huh. I can
amazing.
change them.
And then, but if you can do the same thing and add that more emotional journey and not let it be just something formulaic in there to make it interesting, then you've got a really deep book, right? Now people are going to really recommend your book. Everybody wants to read it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You mentioned, in your notes here too, so I'm just gonna jump ahead a little bit,
Yeah, go ahead.
because this kinda ties in and it fascinates me, and you have characters should misinterpret emotions, and I wanna talk a little bit about that because that is something that I actually stumbled into on one of the books I was writing, is I had a scene that was completely flat until I realized, "Oh, you know what? What if there was this really big misunderstanding?"
Mm.
So, yeah, so and you say, like, angry because they're scared, right? And so, people when they're scared, they tend to lash out, which is, perfect for a writer.
Yes. Yeah, no, and as a reader, I love that. I love the misunderstandings where the reader's like, "Oh, I know why they're doing that," but the character doesn't.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
it's really fun to, like, actually read that happening.
Where we don't want it to go is, like one key moment that, um, this big misunderstanding kinda sets up the entire rest of the book, right? Where people feel a little bit cheated. So we don't wanna do that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's like the love story, the big misunderstanding. I think that, like, um, what am I thinking of? The romances where the girl that runs the cupcake shop and the guy that, is stranded in a snowstorm, he's from the big city, and they have this big misunderstanding which drives the entire plot. I'm forgetting the name of the trope. Anyway, yeah, so when a misunderstanding kinda drives the plot, feels a little, feels like cheating sometimes, but yeah, I love a scene where somebody just gets it completely wrong, and then, that's a really big source of tension that could carry on for a while.
Right, and I think what you're talking about, I don't know the name of the trope, but, like, somebody failed with it, right? If you're like, "Oh my god, that's stupid, that this month's understanding would lead to all this," but
Mhm.
when people get it right, it's, like, awesome, right? You
Yeah.
could make your whole book I can't think of any movies based off that concept, but your whole book could be based off that, and you've just made it so believable that you carried the reader with you.
Sure, sure, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Save the Cat. And we're not talking so much about the writing method, the Blake Snyder writing method, as we are, what he kind of the little linchpin that he based that on. Do you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, that would be great. So Save the Cat, if you're not familiar with it, it's a screenwriting book, right? The title of the book.
Yes.
And it's this idea in your movie that at the opening of your movie, your main character literally can save a cat. So a great example is the Hunger Games. Katniss saves a cat very early in the story. And it's supposed to show you, oh, this person's a great person. I want to root for them.
Hmm.
So you could have in there like an actual scene where they do something virtuous. I think if you layer that in with emotions, though, you could go a lot further, right? So it doesn't have to be some literal one good act, like, oh, it's a good person, I like them, but an example could be something your protagonist is really working hard on, and you put them in that scene, and it's so difficult for them, but they are able to do whatever action is needed. And so then your reader is like, oh, I know how hard that was. They're trying, you know what I mean? They're trying to be such
Hmm.
a good person here, even though that is like like ripping off an arm or something. So I just think you do want something in the beginning of your story to, like, show us why we should care about this character, and usually the Save the Cat is to show that they're a good person and you should care about them. But I
Hmm.
don't even think you have to show that they're a good person because there's a lot of people love villains.
Yeah, and I think it applies especially to villains because one of the things that you try to do to keep from making them too flat is to humanize them a little bit. And you can give them like a little save the cat moment. So for example, in my first book, I have an FBI agent. He's a very bad guy. He has very few redeeming qualities about him, but he loves his wife. He dotes on her. He clings to her as kind of a necessary force in his life. This was I mean, I very intentionally set this up as kind of his save the cat moment. His something that we can say, "Oh, he really is a human." I mean, he's just a very, very flawed human, but yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think that's why people love villains so much, or one of the reasons too.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a lot of reasons to like a villain, but that probably made your villain so much more interesting to have that layer of conflict or complication in there. It just makes them more human. You want to see what this person's going to do. They don't have to abide by the laws the rest of us do. That's usually why we call them the villain. So
Mhm.
they get to act out what we would secretly like to do, but we won't let ourselves do. And then you're making them more human. So I think a lot of people just get drawn into villains. It could be little save the cat moments.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's I don't know, it's a great trick to at least humanize your villains. It's a great trick for your main character too to kind of let you inside of their personality. So you brought up like the Hunger Games. We see that she volunteers as tribute in place of her sister, right? And so that's a tremendous save the cat moment. That is, she's literally saving her sister's life by doing this. So we learn a lot about that character automatically.
Yes. Yeah, and she's a great one because I don't know if I'd call her flawed, but she's not always thinking the best for everyone. She's not like your goody two shoes character.
Right.
Yes.
Especially in the book. More
Yes.
so in the book than the movie. Yeah,
Yes. I mean, she's a great example because she does make those triumphant moves, but she's kind of a flawed character in that regard as well.
for sure. And that's something that gosh, just to kind of deep dive into that a little bit too, is not only do you kind of need these little moments to show why you should be rooting for your character, but your main character, but we also want to see the flaws too. We want to see them a little bit selfish. You will hook me from the very beginning by giving me a flawed character, somebody who, has, obviously we want to be able to root for them, but, something like, they're jealous or, that they have a hair trigger on their anger, right? Something that's just, it makes us uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah. I think it's great to have flaws in there. And that's always a hard one. I mean, that's something I've think about and worry about, are people going to like my main character? You know? So I'm really worried about that for a long time. Because I read a book recently. I tried to read a book. I quit maybe halfway through because
Hmm.
I did not like the main character. I'm like, this person is annoying.
Yeah, you can definitely go overboard with that. Yeah. The main characters that are I guess the flaws that I don't like, so much are when a character is kind of whiny.
Mm-hmm.
When they just I mean, yeah, we get your circumstances suck or whatever. I would probably be the whiny person in their shoes. I mean, but I don't wanna read about that.
Right? Okay, here's the character that is like nails on the chalkboard for me, and it is all over YA fantasy. She's the tough girl. Mind you, she's only 16 or 17, so she's
Uh-huh.
still like a kid in my opinion, but she's so tough because she has a smart mouth and she gives people attitude. I like that's nails on the chalkboard. Like even when I was a teenager, that would drive me crazy because I'm like, you being a smartass and making these like ridiculous statements does not indicate if you are actually genuinely tough. And so it just kills me. That was one of the books I quit reading. I was like, I cannot handle this character.
Megan and I were talking about that just a couple weeks ago, actually. Is yeah, the especially, like, they've moved to a new school, and,
Mm.
some the class bully gets in their face, and, man, they're just, like, right back at it, and they're cool because they're cool.
Man, yeah, there's certain, but I think people still like it. So it's like a popular trope out there. I assume they still like it.
And probably because, I know, when I was a teenager, we all had those insecurities, right? And we all wanted to be able to at least identify with a character like that. Maybe there's a lot of, teenagers out there reading it and kind of doing a self-insert of what they kind of wish they would be able to do, would be
Oh, yeah,
my guess
maybe.
on it.
No, that probably is. I can tell you in my book that will not fly. That is a key. And I do have a female teenager character. And I will just say being a smartass and being difficult, just to be difficult on purpose, is not a sign of strength.
Mhm.
So you will not see that in my book because it drives me crazy. When I was a teen, it drove me crazy. Let me tell you, there was this girl and she was the tough kid in our school.
Mhm.
He like would just get in everybody's faces and do all this stuff. And this is a bad story. I probably shouldn't be sharing it. Okay, I'll give you the background. I'm from Tennessee, rural Tennessee. So as teenagers, we thought it was a fun thing to drive around at night looking for graveyards. I'm in the middle of nowhere in the woods. So
Okay.
ultimate scary, right? In the woods, forgotten graveyards. We have a lot of these tiny graveyards
I love this.
that nobody knows about. So we were out being evil, looking for graveyards, and she had a breakdown at the graveyard. And I was like, you act so tough all the time. And you're like holding on to me scared. We're just in a graveyard at night. But okay, that was a bad story. I probably shouldn't have shared.
The thing about the really tough kid trope is that in reality, like, there are consequences to being that kid. It's a hard thing to be able to keep up. Like, if I'm reading a book and this character just has a really smart mouth and, it always has all the best quips and everything like that, and they're in the teacher's face and everything like that. Well, I mean, the teachers are not gonna put up with this. You're gonna suffer a consequence, and other kids are not going to put up with this. It's very hard to be that person.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really good point.
Um, alright, so let's talk about the emotional journey then, and this is connecting the inner and outer journey.
Yes. So this one was once again Story Genius talked about this a lot. And that goes back to the ancient art of storytelling. I mean, we as humans, sorry, I'm about to get on a soapbox, have been telling stories for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. And the great thing about stories is you learn from them, right? You go on this emotional journey with Odysseus or these other famous characters and get to experience all these things. And it literally, you're smarter at the end. You didn't have to go on the Odyssey. but you went through that experience. So it's almost a core part of you and your
Yeah.
brain has grown through it. So you want to add that interior journey because that's what people want as part of their story. If you just have the outer journey, it's like watching some of these bad action movies where it's tons of action scenes and you really don't even care about the characters.
Right. You just want explosions.
Yes, it's just explosions, and, I mean, they turn into B movies, and they're fun. We watched Sharknado, it was fun. It was boring, but it was fun. But adding that inner journey is, like, such a huge part of it. So one of the things is you'll map out the outer journey, so that's, like, all your scenes, what's changing each scene, plotting it out, and then do the same thing with your inner journey. Every single scene, and this is what I've been going through with my book, what's the emotional state and how is it changing
Mhm.
for each scene? So one of the comments that I had, like my character has this traumatic experience. So she's in a state of dread and then she's in more dread. Then she thinks about it some more in a later scene and she's in more dread. So it's just dread to dread to dread, which would be really easy to do in a horror book. I'm almost following the same model, but it gets boring at that point because I'm experiencing the same emotion over and over and I'm not getting this flow of in and out with it. And that wouldn't be the only emotion somebody's experiencing because we experience so many different emotions just through a day.
Yeah.
So for me, I've had to go back through in every single chapter. What emotional state is she in? Where is it going? How is she at the end? And then the same thing, instead of this building up of dread, up until like the act one climax, now there's like moments of happiness, of forgetting the bad thing that happened, hanging out with her friends. Then the dread comes back in, but now the dread's a little bit different because it's more embodied. Or at one point, instead of being in dread, she goes through shock of like, I can't even process what just happened. So it's like varying those different emotions as you go. And then you have this full giant emotional journey. So this was a big one for me. I have this huge scene at the very end of the book, and it's like this huge climatic scene that's really important because it ties into that emotional journey and what the character's been working on. But it didn't feel quite right. So one of the exercises I did, and a lot of the stuff I'm talking about, I'll just say it's from the book The Emotional Craft of Fiction by Donald Moss. Awesome book. So I've been using his book to figure out a lot of these inner character moments. So she has this big climatic scene and it's huge. So what do I want in that moment? And then from that moment, write it backwards all the way up to the beginning. So what is her initial flaw that she has at the beginning that would eventually lead into that huge climatic moment?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then this one's really good. I don't have that cathartic moment. I was missing that healing moment after you've like, been on this emotional journey. There should be catharsis where you feel better. So showing that moment, and the example they used in that book was actually from one of Stephen King's horror books, which I thought was crazy. But showing characters that healing that happens, after you progress through that journey. And then another one's really important. By the end of the book, your character should be different. Their worldview is different. Everybody around them's view is different. Because that gives that reader the same thing. I've been on this emotional journey. I'm different, just having gone with my main or gone with that character on that journey.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, and as you were saying, you were looking at your different scenes and, it was just constant constant dread. And that gets exhausting after a while for a reader.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
To have just constantly building up. It's like, there's no break in the action. It just keeps coming and keeps coming. Or like you say, just a kind of a steady state, a steady emotional state that doesn't really change. Both of those can be exhausting, and there's gotta be something to break that up for sure.
Yeah, and I think if you add in new stuff too, now the reader's getting something new. So it pulls them back in like, "Well, that's new. I didn't know that."
Mhm, mhm. Well, and especially in either horror or thrillers, it's always a great strategy to kind of build in a point where the characters either are safe or feel safe. So they've just gone through something big. If it's a thriller, maybe they made it to the safe house finally, right? And so now there's this moment you can you can relax a little bit, you can breathe. But then, even in that moment of safety, you're gonna you're gonna kinda start building it back up again. So you decrease all that tension, you let all that tension out, but as a writer, the only reason you're doing that is so you can build it all the way back up again.
right?
Yeah.
I modeled the climax of my book after I think it's Gardens of the Moon. Have you read that one? Do
I
you
have
read
not read that.
fantasy? Okay.
So I used to be a really big fantasy reader, and for whatever reason, I just don't, read that much fantasy anymore. But I should because there's some really good fantasy out there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was gonna say it is Gardens of the Moon. I mean, it's a great fantasy book. And the climax of it, he just made it bigger and bigger. And like it just kept getting bigger. And I was like, that's awesome. I'm totally gonna do that in my climax. So
Uh-huh.
literally once you get on that roller coaster, it's a roller coaster. It just keeps going and going and going and getting bigger and bigger. And as a writer, I was like, I'm tired. I need a break. So then I have that safe moment where they've got that safety, they've stopped and are able to reflect and talk about things.
Uh-huh.
And I
Uh-huh.
was literally as a writer, I was like, "I'm so tired of all the action. They need to take a break."
You know what's really funny? I had a story I was writing, and I realized that my characters would get sleepy when I was getting sleepy. They
Funny.
would they would go to bed when I was feeling like I wanted to go to bed. It was really funny, yeah. So,
That's awesome.
and then I became an outliner so that I wouldn't do that kind of thing anymore.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
this is so silly. The climax of my book, they've been fighting. They've got swords, so it's a lot of sword fighting.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Oh, they're still fighting. Why did I make this so big?" So, like, the big fight scene, it's people talking while fighting. So it's all about the conversation
Yeah.
going on during the
Yeah.
fight, and the fight's just, like, a couple of words in the background.
That reminds me of the director Kevin Smith from Jay and Silent Bob fame. He was talking about if he ever wrote a Batman movie. He was saying, "Here's how I would write a Batman movie. It's just Batman and I can't remember the other character he mentioned, just leaning up against a car and just talking. Like, that would be his Batman movie is just all dialogue," which I thought
That
was
would
really
be
funny.
awesome. I don't remember which Batman movie it was. It was the one with Heath Ledger in it as the Joker.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Is
Was
it
that
The
The
Dark
Dark Knight?
Knight?
Yeah,
Dark
I think
Knight.
so.
That movie, that is so it's like a thriller, and it stayed intense the entire way through, and when I got to the end of that movie, I mean, it was a good movie, but it was like you're on a roller coaster the entire time, and by the time I was done, I was like, "I can't even watch that again." Like, that was too intense because you need some of that downtime to
You do.
relax and have happy moments, and I don't think they had any in that movie.
No, I don't think so. I mean, that seems to be one of the hallmarks of, like, a Batman movie is first of all, it's all very, very dark all the time, even during the daytime, and then, yeah, it's kind of these movies where it's just relentless action get exhausting.
Oh, it gets exhausting. But, the Joker in that movie, like, everybody loves Heath Ledger's Joker, and one of the things that he did is he made him so conflicting. Like, he'd be nice at times, and then
Yeah.
crazy, and then
Yeah.
ultra crazy, mean, psycho, but then nice at times, and just, like, all those different conflicts in there probably made him I don't know if I'd say the best, but the best of all the Jokers.
I kinda think he's my favorite Joker. I'm trying to think of if there's a better Joker. I liked the Jack Nicholson Joker, but only because it was the first Batman movie. I think it was the first actual cool superhero movie that had come out because I saw it I think it came out in 1989, and I saw it, like, at the theater. Dating myself here, but so Jack Nicholson was a big star at the time. I really enjoyed the Jack Nicholson Joker. But you're right, the Heath Ledger Joker, not to get off too far on a tangent, but, yeah, he was very layered, and I think a lot of that was ad lib, actually. I think he sorta, just kinda came up with some of his own dialogue and stuff, so, yeah.
Well, and I think too, like, those I don't know, like, he terrified me in that movie. Like, I've had
Yeah.
nightmares where he's, like, the demon in it. It's the Joker from that movie, and I think it's all those layers of emotions he put in it really trigger fear.
Yeah, yeah, I mean if you imagine, like, just running into him in a dark alley or something, yeah, he's definitely the most terrifying.
So terrifying. But then if you think of, like, Lord of the Rings, and I shouldn't be quoting stuff because I don't remember the names. Is it Sargon? Is he the bad guy in Lord of the Rings?
Sauron.
Sauron. Okay, so he's
Yeah.
like I'm not scared of him at all. He's just I'm evil, robotic evil, but Heath Ledger is, like, terrifying to me.
Yeah. Well, Sauron is more like the concept of evil, right? Like, the more terrifying stuff is actually, like, the implementation of what he does, so, like, scouring the land with his orcs uh, and corruption, like, that's the big theme in Lord of the Rings is corruption, right? The ring corrupts, but yeah, as far as, like, an actual big bad goes, like, he's just this eyeball on top of a tower, right?
Right? It's not that scary. But if he had shown up dressed up as a creepy nurse, acting nice at times and, like,
Right?
funny at times, I'd have nightmares about him too. It was so terrifying.
Well, let me tell you about the Silmarillion. S because then you actually do get a little bit of Sauron, but
Okay.
yeah, but that's a whole nerd topic. I told you I don't tend to read a lot of fantasy these days, but I grew up on fantasy, and I was a massive Lord of the Rings nut. I think I had, like, Lord of the Rings, the books, on, like, repeat, so I'd buy a book, a fantasy book or something, and like, Sword of Shannara or something, and I would just, like, get through that immediately, and then I wouldn't have another book to read, so I'd pick up Lord of the Rings again, and I'd start reading that until, the weekend, my mom would take me to the mall, we'd go to the bookstore and find another book or something, so, like, Lord of the Rings was always my go-to, but the Silmarillion is like the what happened thousands of years before Lord of the Rings, and I
Oh,
completely was into that as well, so I will spare you that nerdness.
that's awesome, though. Isn't it great when you have your comfort books? You're like,
Yeah,
"Life got hard, I'm gonna go get comforted with
that's
this
right,
book.
that's right.
I'm gonna escape into this world."
Alright, let us should we get back to the topic at hand?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about on, kind of the emotional journey part of it?
Yeah. So one of the things I heard recently was just this lady, I forgot her name, so I can't give her credit for saying it, but she literally took a wall in her house and she laid out her plot journey and then she put her emotional journey. I'm looking at the wall, putting my arms up in the air so you guys can't see it. She put the emotional journey underneath it because that's one of the other things is the writer, you can't keep track of 100, 80,000 or 100,000 words exactly where things are. And so actually drawing and laying out all these different types of journeys on the wall can be a good way to make sure you're following it and that things are progressing and changing. Because I think for readers, that pulls readers out fast when they just go from dread to more dread to some more dread.
Yeah, yeah, and I do that through outlining. But when I
Okay.
Yeah, so and this is why so I tried doing, more pantsing, and I tend to get lost. I tend to get, like, too much in my head, and so I have since kinda gone back to outlining again, and outlining works really well for me in that I can track the emotional journey right alongside with the plot.
That's
So that yeah, that's my big wall.
I think I'm staring at an empty wall in my house, and I'm like, "I think I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna completely cover it in Post-it notes."
They make that paint that is like, marker board paint, so you can
Oh,
paint your whole wall, and then you've just got like you just get those little expo markers that people use for
draw
whiteboards,
all over
and
it.
yeah, you can just use that. Yeah.
Later, after I go crazy, they'll come in and show this as the evidence
Right.
when I broke down.
Yeah, so it worked out pretty well for me to I had this very specific emotional journey in mind for my second book. My first book, I actually got kinda lucky because when I wrote my first book, I mean, I had this concept of this emotional journey that I wanted my main character to go through, but I hadn't really kind of formulated and so I just sort of got lucky that it all worked out in the end. With my second book, I was much more thorough about it, and by that time, I had read more craft books. I'd learned more about how to write emotional journeys and things like that, and so I was very conscious of, in the middle of the book, like, here is where my character is emotionally. And then I just started subdividing. And so, okay, a quarter of the way through the book, then my character needs to be this. And an eighth of the way needs to be this. And then y I mean, that sounds very rigid, but, it gets a once I actually start writing the book, it tends to kinda flow and ebb as as the story moves along, so it starts for me anyway, it starts kind of very formulaic, but then gets a little more artistic as I go.
And yeah, that's a hard one too, balancing the artistic because you don't want anything that's formulaic, right? You don't want
Right.
the reader being like, "Oh, I can already tell what's gonna happen." So going back and varying it and adding like that artisticness to it, and then
Mhm,
even surprising things. So that was another one I was gonna bring up. One of the things you can do is have different layers on emotions.
mhm.
So I was gonna say I'm changing topics. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so different layered emotions. So instead of when you write a scene, your character has this one big emotion they're working through. Can you add in some unexpected other layers? So, for example, my example is during the pandemic, I'm in Southern California. We had these massive wildfires happening.
Yeah.
It was like the whole world's coming into an end, right? There's this pandemic. Now everything's on wildfires everywhere. We're all trapped at home. So it's terrible. And I went outside and I could see the wildfires burning at night. So the first emotion you would think would be fear, right? Oh, you can see it. We're going to lose everything. Maybe shock. But I will tell you, in that actual moment, I felt extreme excitement and wanted the world to burn. I was like, this is the most exciting thing I've ever seen. Burn it all down. Let's flee and never come back. So, like, not having that typical emotion, but adding in, like, the unexpected emotion, because now readers are like, "Oh, that's intriguing. Like, I wouldn't have even thought of that."
Yeah. That's really interesting. Any way that you can subvert expectations, unbalance the reader, and what a great way to do that by just adding an unexpected emotion. I love that.
Right? Well, and
Yeah,
if you're doing the outlining too, when you're writing, you could think about that, like, what so this is what I outlined, what I was expecting, so what could be some other unexpected things for that scene? And I
mhm.
still follow that same emotional journey, but now I'm mixing it up. It's not I'm getting away from the formulaic.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm trying to think if I do that in my books. I may not do that. I might have missed that might be a missed opportunity for me. I'll have to think about that.
So,
Yeah.
not a missed opportunity, right? Because you can always try new things, right? And that's the joy of writing is we learn and try something new. We're
Yeah.
constantly changing,
Yeah.
and your
Well,
books
now
are
now I have
already
to go back
perfect.
and rewrite all my books. Yes.
No, no, no. Do not go back and start editing again. They're already perfect. Not I think that's something if you're like me and we are over editors, we tend to anytime we hear something, we're like, "Oh, I need to put that in my book. Do I have
Yeah.
that in my book? I gotta go back and re-edit it." But your
And
book
I'm a
is
total over editor. And yes, exactly. Every time I hear something new, I'm like, I got to do that. Yeah.
right? I do it every single time.
So you mentioned also positivity on the page. Both of my books operate in some very kind of dark worlds. It would make these books really hard to digest if I had nothing but just this grim world that these people are trying to just survive through, right? And so this very much strikes home for me, like little moments of humor.
Yeah. Yeah, how did you handle that in your books? Because there a lot I think with thrillers and horror or dark fantasy, that's hard because 'cause you're trying to show, like, the darker sides of life and society.
Yeah. So here's an example from my first book. My main character, so she's Russian in the middle of Texas and she's got to steal a car. So she has stolen this FBI agent's car. So she's
Wait, she
driving.
stole an FBI agent's car?
Yeah,
That's whose
she's
car? That's awesome.
And so she's gotta dump this FBI agent's car because, it's an FBI agent's car. So she's gotta steal a new car, and she's in this very small town in Texas, and she comes to this bowling alley. And so this was kind of a so we had just finished up a pretty dark scene, and I wanted to kinda make it a little lighter, and so I just envision this bowling alley in this little town in Texas and bright lights and everything. And she's lived in the Soviet Union all her life. She's just is ill-equipped to deal with this situation. But she follows this couple into this bowling alley thinking that she's gonna like steal their car keys. The guy that runs the bowling alley mistakes her for being French. And so, this takes place in 1961. He's a war veteran. He lost his arm in the war, and so he's just yammering on to her about how he lost his arm in France during the war, and all she wants to do is get these damn car keys from these people. But she's got to deal with this, and so it's kind of a funny scene. And I thought
Awesome.
and then the following scene on that is actually like another action scene, kind of like, death is on the line type scene. And so it sandwiches as a couple like kind of harrowing scenes into this just kind of little bit silly scene, but it seems to repeat. Well, readers have said they really enjoyed that scene, so I I feel like it works. Yeah.
Right, and I think isn't that positivity, like, this person comes in, she's foreign, she's in Texas, and the guy's being friendly with her and
Uh-huh.
talking to her and telling her, like, his personal life story, because that really happens in life. People just
Sure.
open up to strangers, so I think that's awesome because that is that idea of can I it doesn't have to always be so dark and heavy and dark, and not everybody's cruel all the time. And
Right.
those scenes also, they especially if you're like panicked and you're worried about this character as a reader, it makes you feel better. Like, oh my God, thank God somebody's being nice to her.
Mhm. And it's also, the way that I wrote this scene, it also advanced the plot. So I'm not just throwing it in there to lighten the mood. Spoiler alert, she manages to get the car keys and she manages to steal the car. So we do advance the plot, but it's just a lighter way to do it as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. What? So she's from Soviet Union, 1960s. Did they even have bowling alleys?
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
from. They did. Okay, I didn't know.
You mean in the Soviet Union?
Yeah, in the Soviet Union. I was wondering if this whole bowling alley, she walks in and she's like, "Oh my God, what are they doing?"
So, yeah, so I researched this and I've this was like 4 years ago that I actually was writing this book, so I don't remember all of it. Bowling was known in the Soviet Union, but it was like there weren't bowling alleys around Moscow. There might be a bowling alley that the high-end apparat the high-end the upper class of the Soviet Union got to use or something like that. It would have been completely unknown to her.
So that's awesome then for a scene.
Yeah, she was completely, just out of her depth, and so and these are things I love too, is like fish out of water type thing. Like, he tells her she's gotta put on bowling shoes. She doesn't understand why she's gotta put on these shoes. It's just a whole scene. Anyway, buy my book when it comes out.
I will. Sure. All the listeners should too.
Yes, yes.
Wait, what's the title of this book?
It's called The Cosmonaut.
The Cosmonaut. Okay. I was
Yeah.
like, all I can think of is The Snow Maiden. I can't remember the name of the other book.
The
Cos
Snow Maiden is my 2nd book.
Okay.
Yeah.
When is that one coming out?
To be determined. On my current trajectory, I will probably self-publish it after The Cosmonaut. The Snow Maiden, we'll see what happens. So I'm currently querying The Snow Maiden.
Okay. So it's
Yes.
in the works. It's
Yeah.
coming.
So, yeah. So if I manage to land an agent with The Snow Maiden, who knows? Maybe you'll have to go to a bookstore to buy it. But,
I
yeah.
will.
Thank you.
I can't wait. I can't wait for your book and for Megan's book to come out. I will
I
be
know.
buying both of them.
Well, and I can't wait for yours either.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. This is gonna be
One
great.
day, one day it'll come out.
So regale us. Do you have because I love this idea of positivity on the page, right? Of, like, throwing in these upbeat scenes. So do you have, like, an example of, something that worked in your book?
In my book,
Or not maybe even, like, a short story that you've written or something?
yeah. So in my book, so it starts with action and kind of this dread of stuff happening in the beginning.
Mhm.
And there's a scene, there's a couple of these different scenes mixed in where the high tension point where it's like a group of teenagers hanging out and they play Monopoly. So like
Mhm.
these fun, cozy moments. There's usually a fireplace. Like, there's a
Yeah.
fireplace when they're playing Monopoly. It's raining outside. They're, like, in northern Vermont in the woods, so super cozy, and I wanna be in that scene. And then later in the book, kind of in the act 2 to act 3, between these, like, really tense, emotional, high, like, action points, I call it the balcony scene, where the main character and the love interest are on the balcony just hanging out and kind of almost whining about their lives. They're not whining, but, like, just talking and, like, actually saying some deep stuff, and then it just turns into, that kind of flirty, now we're just flirting back and forth, but it's a real light moment, and for
Mhm.
me, it was like I was like, "I want this scene, it's my feel-good scene, it's gotta be in the book," right? Because those are the building moments for the relationship at least, so in a sense, those scenes, not so much like the characters are being positive, but it's like they're like happy moments of those feel good feelings,
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, again, it just serves to decompress everything, decompress the reader so that you can start layering that tension up again.
right? And there's a lot. So, do you know Studio Ghibli? Are you familiar with that at all?
I no, uh-uh.
Oh, okay, so there is this Japan. They make a lot of movies from Japan. And one of the things with the Studio Ghibli movies, so it's the famous ones in the US would be probably Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service.
Yeah, 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 I'm familiar with the movies, yeah.
Okay, so something that they put in the movies is they'll have those slow moments where not much is happening and you can actually breathe. And I
Huh?
feel like in the US, we are so like rush, rush, rush. It's got to be building, it's got to build, everything's
Yeah.
got to be happening all the
It's
time.
all a
And it's
Marvel movie, yeah.
yeah, oh my gosh, Marvel movies for sure, but, like, those slow moments, characters are kind in some of those moments. It's
Uh-huh.
just it's really nice, and you see that I see it with some of the Japanese stuff, and I read a lot of these Chinese books. They also will have these slower scenes that I feel like in Western books, like the US and Europe, they would be like, "No, you gotta add more tension. We gotta push this a lot faster."
Yeah. That's that's interesting. So one of the things I started doing when I was researching my Soviet cosmonaut book was I just started trying to find like old Soviet movies to see kind of get a sense of like life in the Soviet Union during that time. And one of the things that I noticed that they do is there will just be kind of a montage. Like almost every Soviet Union movie I saw had this montage, and it's a very slow sort of just life is happening to these people. There's just music playing during this montage, and it's usually like somebody playing a guitar. So, same thing. It just kind of brings everything almost to a screeching halt, and you get this little 2 or 3 minute moment where it's just people living their life and this folk song on guitar playing over it. So, yeah,
That's
interesting.
awesome. I have never seen a Soviet Union movie. Now I'm gonna have to see like, try to find one. That would be
Okay,
so interesting.
I believe this is a really hard one to find, but I believe you can get it on Amazon. It is called Moscow Does Not Believe in Tears. It's one of the most famous Soviet Union movies. It was, let me see, I think it was 1978 or something like that. It's a very good movie. It has an ending that a lot of Westerners don't like, but it's a very Russian ending.
It Are their endings just sad and tragic?
Often, but I would say their endings are cultural. And so, there's just cultural differences that they have. And so this is a movie about it's a love story about two people who are kind of at opposite ends of the socioeconomic spectrum, and but it's the woman who's like the high powered executive. I don't know if executive is the right word because it was communism, but she's kind of this, CEO type person, and he's like, he works with his hands. I think he's a machinist or something, and they meet on a train, and so they start having an affair, and she hides the fact that she's this high powered executive from him, and then eventually that becomes a source of tension with them. So anyway, watch it. Yeah, I won't spoil the end, but yeah, it's great. Let's move on to what's the author's viewpoints of the world. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the idea of this This was one of the topics in the Emotional Craft of Fiction book,
Hmm.
was this idea that as writers, our viewpoint, our energy is going into this book. And so as we're writing, what emotional state are we in? Or because I mean, if you go on threads, probably especially threads, probably gonna see it on Instagram, you just see a lot of whining and complaining from people, right? Like, "Oh my god, I don't have time to write." That's how I started this podcast, was complaining about time. But I mean, that's the constant thing, like, "I don't have time to write," "I keep getting rejected," there's gatekeepers, and I think it's really easy as a writer to get beat down because it's not the easiest process to go through. But most writers, when we started, I mean, we come at it full of joy, right? There's something we wanna share. There's some
Yeah.
story in it. And so, what state are you in when you're writing? And it usually shows up in your writing. So, we were talking about the positivity. If you're coming from a bitter place, or I listen to a lot of self help improvement as well. I probably shouldn't admit that, but I love that stuff.
Your secret is safe with me and however many
And
people listen to this
whoever
podcast.
people out there. But are you in a lack mentality? It's hard when you're a writer too to see all these other people getting picked up, their books coming out, to not
Yeah,
be jealous,
sure.
right? So, and if you are coming in from those kind of darker places, or for me, I'm very insecure about my writing. So coming in like, oh, my writing's never going to be good enough, it actually can affect the way you write and how it comes out on the page. Versus if I'm coming in like full of joy and I just want to show the story. And who cares if my writing's not good? The reality is the first draft is horrible. It's horrible for everyone. All the famous writers say it's a terrible thing. Don't waste your time panicking about the first draft because if you're like me, you're going to go through infinite number of edits anyways, and it'll turn into something else. But first, putting yourself in that state of joy, like working through your own emotions. So then your actual work that you're putting out there, your craft, now can convey those emotions to readers.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a great point. And I'll just add too that it doesn't even, at least for me, it doesn't matter. Like I tend to write a lot of dark stuff, thrillers, but I feel like my writing and my creativity is better. Even though I'm writing a dark story, it's better when I am in a good kind of mental place. So, if I'm having a bad mental day, not only does the writing come hard, but it just doesn't come out great on the page at all. So, I think even what you're writing, I don't think is dependent on that mindset that you're coming in with. If you're writing, horror, really dark stuff, it still is gonna come out better, I think, if you've found yourself in a better place.
So, great example. So, you can be writing terrible stuff, but are
Mhm.
you smiling and you're like evil and happy as you write it? And you're
Right.
like, this is the scene. He's about to eat her and there'll be blood everywhere and it's wonderful. And that's a state of joy, like making the most horrible scene you can put out there, and putting people in fear, and it shows, right? Because you have made this, like, amazing scene, and you feel good doing it, and if you're not in that good emotional state, then it is, like, painful, right? To actually
Yeah,
try to write out these scenes. As writers, if you're not feeling the joy in that moment, I would step away and write something that brings you joy. And I mean, it could be a monster scene. A lot of the stuff I write tends to be on the dark side as well, but that brings me joy. And so when you're in that state of joy, now you can infinitely produce more and more and more, and you have that drive as well. So it's not only going to make a better work, but it also will help you on your path.
absolutely, yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself. Ann Wells, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
Really
thank you.
appreciating it. And where can we find you, unless you don't wanna be found?
No, come find me. I want readers. I'm
Excellent.
desperate. I've thought about this a lot. I don't even want money. I just want people to read my stories. I just want readers. So you don't even have to pay me if you read my stuff. So come to my website. My website is AE Wells. So AEWELLS dash writes.com. Or you can search AE Wells and I should show up. Hopefully. I'm struggling with making the website and getting it into Google.
We'll put it in the show notes too.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. I'm on Instagram as AE Wells Writes as well. I've got free short stories on my website. I'm also offering a free short story fairy tale if you sign up for my newsletter as well, that I really love. So I hope you'll read it because I want readers so bad. That brings me all my joy in life. Readers.
Absolutely. Money is nice too, though.
I mean, you need it.
Yes.
I actually think I feed off more from readers, but I also say that I have another job that makes money, so I'm not needing the money as much.
There you go.
If I
There you
needed
go.
money, I'd probably be saying, "Yes, please buy my book. I need this money." But yes, please read my stories. I'm in lack of readers, not on the money side.
Awesome. Well, this has been a fantastic discussion. Like I say, it's one of the things that I struggle with. I think it's something a lot of writers struggle with, and I can say at least for me, this has been very helpful. I've got a lot of things that I'm going to think about, and a couple books that I'm finally going to read based on your recommendation. I will put those titles in the show notes as well. In the meantime, you can find us on all of the socials. We are Badlit Friends on Blue Sky, Threads. Meagan would want me to say evil Threads. We are Badlit Friends on YouTube, actually. So we do the podcast on YouTube. We're getting a little traction there. And if you want to email us, we are Badlit Friends. What are we? Oh, we're badlitfriends at gmail.com. So feel free to shoot us a line, say hi, give us your thoughts, leave comments on Spotify. That helps us grow the show. But if you must, wherever you listen to your podcast, leave a comment there. That would be great. And then again, thank you so much, Anne. And we'll see you next week. We don't have on our topic for next week, we're going to go back to the deep dive into the author industrial complex. Yeah, so that should be fun. Thanks again, everyone. Bye.
Bye.